Checking here to see if the broccoli's surviving. We'll see if it ends up making it. Really got whipped by that snow, but still in one piece. So we'll see what happens. There may be snow on the ground, but there is spring in my heart. Today we're going to be using soil blocks to start planting for our spring and summer harvest. So I hope that you'll join me and let's go see what we can create. As you might have noticed, I'm still at my urban location and I don't know exactly when I'm going to be moving out to the new homestead. But because I live in the Pacific Northwest, our growing season tends to be a little bit shorter anyway, and it's essential for me to go ahead and get those seeds started, even though I'm not 100% sure where I'm going to be planting the actual transplants at this point. So some of my items I might go ahead and plant here at my urban location, like lettuce, where I can harvest it a little bit sooner. And then some of my longer term items I'm going to try and put out at the new homestead, like tomatoes when they're ready to go out, and my peppers and things of that nature. So we're gonna get some things started today, and we're just gonna see where this year takes us. It's kind of that transition period, which is always a challenge when you're trying to do gardening and transition to a new location. Not only is it hard to know exactly what kind of plants are going to prosper at the new location, but it's also a little bit challenging knowing when's the right time to plant. Are things going to survive? So we're just going to see how this year goes, and I hope that you enjoy coming along for this part of my transition. I want to give you a little bit of a look at my setup here in the garage. So I just have a simple counter that works really well as a nice planting location. My dad helped me put that in. And then it has a nice shelf down at the bottom so that I can put all of the excess trays and my transplanting pots. Stores everything really, really well. This is the potting soil that we're going to use today. It is the Garden and Bloom Organics potting soil. There are a lot of different potting soil options, but this just happens to be what's available in my area and has worked really well for me for the last few years. I use the Dr. Earth fertilizer, and you can see here it's just the regular tomato, vegetable, and herb fertilizer. I use that pretty standard on most of my plants as I'm getting them started and as I put them out into the garden. And again, it's worked pretty well for me. All right, so if you're new to soil blocking, this is kind of where the magic happens. I have this green container that allows me to mix up the soil with the proper amount of water. I add a little bit of fertilizer to the mix, just because even though the seeds themselves don't need any fertilizer to get started, I've noticed that as they start to grow and they start to take off, they really can use a little bit of a boost in order to keep that growing occurring. So I add the Garden and Bloom potting soil, and then I'll just put a sprinkle of the Dr. Earth fertilizer over the top, mix that in, and then you want to add enough water that your soil is going to hold together, but not be too wet, and if it's too dry, it will just crumble apart and it doesn't really work. So we want to try and keep it as moist as necessary, but not over moist. And then here is the soil blocking tool. This particular one is the 2-inch size, and it makes 4 cells across. Really easy to use. Has the release on here. What I like about soil blocking is that it's very sustainable. You don't have a lot of excess waste going on. You don't have to worry. I've used the styrofoam containers in the past, which I will use later on when I start my beets. But you don't have to worry about it breaking down. So it's very sustainable and multi-purpose use. Also, it keeps the roots contained within that cell. So I've noticed that when I go to transplant the plants, they're really healthy and it continues to allow those roots to grow, and you don't end up having them stifled or breaking off when you go to do transplanting. Let's go ahead and make up a couple of trays. Okay, I added just a touch more water here. I'm gonna give that a good mix. All right. And then I just kind of mound it up so that I can get the soil blocking tool in there. And you're just going to wiggle it down in there. And then I always check Just to make sure that bottom looks kind of flat, I'll bring it over to the tray. I'll plant the seeds going this direction unless I have a lot of one variety that I want to run lengthwise, but most of the time I'll run it widthwise. Then when you get down to the last two, you can only fit two in here. So I'll do my tray like normal, and then I'll just go ahead and press it out into the green container and individually put the blocks in there. And you can see here how well that holds together. Just fantastic. Beautiful. So there's our first one, and I will make probably two more of these trays, and then we'll head indoors for some planting. Okay, so we've moved the production indoors, and now I'm going to go ahead and plant my trays of soil blocks. And what I like to try and do is put things that might be of similar type together so that they have about the same germination rate and will be ready to transplant at about the same time. If it's different, it's fine, because with the blocks you can pull them out individually, but it is just kind of nice to try to keep things semi-similar. If you watched my last video, I'll go ahead and link up above. It's a good idea not to have a gajillion different kinds of varieties, but you know, I like to try a few different things. So last year I had some of the stupus, which was great for my salsas and also for making chili sauce and things of that nature. So I'm gonna plant that again. It was really successful. The Oregon Spring was really successful. Nova was again great for that. I like the early cherry tomatoes just because they're a little bit earlier in the season, so that's really nice. And then this year I'm going to try a grape variety, which is the Ruby Crush. I'll probably just do a couple of the grape tomatoes and then a couple of early cherries. I like to plant this direction because it's a little bit easier for me to keep track of what I'm doing and how I am planting. So you can see here we've already got the dimples that were made by the soil block, and that's where I'm going to place the tomato seed. And we're starting off here with the Ruby Crush, and I'm going to label that with these little markers, which I will link down below in the description. I picked those up at Amazon last year, and they were really, really helpful in keeping track of everything. It's also really helpful if I'm using older seed. I will put on there the year that the seed was from, just so that I have a good handle on why it might not have come up. And then I will do a full column of each of the other 3 varieties of tomatoes, since they are going to be for canning. It gets tricky because I don't necessarily need that many tomatoes myself. However, if I want to have enough of them ripen at the same time so that I can put them up and preserve them, I really do have to have a few more tomatoes. If I have great germination and I end up with extra plants, I also like to give some away to my friends and things of that nature, so it works out just fine. I'll finish out the rest of this tray with my tomatoes and my peppers, and then I'll do a whole tray of greens and a whole tray of brassicas and maybe a few of my herbs. So that's my first flat, and I'm going to go ahead and plant the other 2, and then we will pop these guys under the grow lights and see how that goes. And there we have the beautiful trays of seeds already planted. They're going under the grow light, and we'll see how long it takes for them to come up. I hope you enjoyed today's video and learned a few things. Don't forget to hit that like button as well as subscribe. And I am going to leave you with some views of the beautiful snow that we've had over the past couple of days, and maybe even a glimpse of Ruby. So I hope that you enjoy, and I'll see you back here in the next video. Bye everyone.